Welcome to Career Practitioner Conversations. This podcast is presented by the National Career Development Association. Welcome to the NCDA podcast. I'm Melissa Venable, Director of Professional Development, and this episode continues our DEI Symposium series with a conversation about using career theories to navigate the career issues of veterans. I'm here with Dr. Natasha Barnes-Gwynn and Dr. Linda Holloway. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us.
I am Dr. Natasha Barnes-Gwynn. I am a clinical faculty member with Southern New Hampshire University, where I teach in the clinical mental health program there. I also am the owner and operator of IOU Consultation, which is a career counseling and consulting practice where I work with different secondary, post-secondary, and business sectors, just to help people understand what they want to be when they grow up, even if they've already grown up. So thank you again, Dr. Venable, for having us, and we're excited to talk about this topic. I'll turn it over to Dr. Holloway now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Linda J.M. Holloway, and I'm at the Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama. I've been in higher education over 30-something years, and I'm in the clinical mental health. I do teach the career course. Also, I am a veteran of 27 years. I did 4 comeback tours. I'm dating myself. So Desert Shield, Desert Storm, 2 tours to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. So it was a very exciting time. So I'm just super excited to have this opportunity to talk about career theories and veterans. And I'll also be speaking from my own personal experience. One of the other unique things about what I've been doing lately is I've taken several of my articles and turned them into children's books. And my rationale for doing that is because in looking at mental health in the various areas, I was able to see that this would be a good intervention to work with children in terms of bibliotherapy. So I'm super excited about that.
As Dr. Holloway said, she has a firsthand experience with career issues that veterans may experience because she is a veteran herself. I, on the other hand, am not a veteran. However, I have family members who are veterans, my dad specifically, so I'm what we call a brat. And so I've been able to have a backseat to some of the career issues that I've seen. And outside of my family experience, I have much research in the area as my dissertation focused on veterans, and presentations outside of that have continued to focus on veterans and just issues that they have that are mental health related and career related. So another just tidbit as to why we both were interested in this topic and really wanted to shine some light on the mental health issues, career issues, and some of the theories that could really work to help this population. So just to get started, Dr. Holloway is going to give us some insight into those issues. Like I said, with firsthand experience, who better to tell us about those things than a veteran themselves? So Dr. Holloway, I'll give it to you.
Okay, thank you. So some of the mental health, emotional issues, or number one is actually when you're in comeback. Obviously, you talk about comeback fatigue, just a different stress of being away from your family, being in a new environment and making that transition. So that can be very challenging for one mental health. There, obviously, the military has come a long way in trying to make that connection and being involved with families and making sure that connection is there. But there's still a transition in reference to that because oftentimes the military person, they move a lot. Ideally, they could be in a place for 3 to 4 years. So if you notice that even with families in doing that movement, it can be very challenging, not only for the parents, but also for the children, because they have to get used to a different school. They may move to a different country. So there's the social psychological adjustment issue, but oftentimes also with the individual who is actually making that move. They have to make some very drastic decisions. Do I move my entire family, or do just a military person themselves move, depending on the nature of the movement? And so that can cause depression, anxiety, stress, a lot of different issues. Also, physical health is an issue because in the military, I am from the Army, but you also have the Marines, you also have the Navy and the Air Force. So when you think about all the individuals that, in terms of the physical activities that they do, it's a wear and tear on your body because you're running, you have rucksacks, you have all of these things, you're carrying weapon. And a lot of the, I guess you would say, clothing that was designed. For example, in combat, you're wearing these breastplates. These breastplates was not necessarily designed for women. So you already have a tremendous amount of weight on you. And it can cause all kinds of physical ailments in terms of your back, your knees over extended period of time. And during our last Operation Iraqi Freedom, as well as Operation Afghanistan, as well as Iraq, there were soldiers who had to, service members who had to wear this gear for an extended period of time. So that means they're eating in it. That means that sometimes they may have to even sleep in it. And so it can cause a lot of physical stress. Also, when dealing with veterans, if they are working on a particular job, they can have multiple appointments. And oftentimes they're not willing to share that because when you hear the word mental, sometimes people automatically think, oh gosh, you got something really drastic going on. And so they don't want to lose their job. But also just having these multiple appointments can also cause them to be maybe absent for work or looked at very differently. So all of these things can be really challenging. Also, when we think about transition, we also think about this is an individual who had a uniform. This is someone every day they put on pretty much the same outfit, unless they're doing their PT or something of that nature or going to some other kind of service, then they will wear their Class A. But for the most part, they didn't have to think about what they had to wear. So now they're in the workforce and they're having to think about this. Also, you have to think about individuals who have had rank or who have people who have saluted them. And they have, when they walk into the room, automatically people stand up. So now they're now walking into a particular environment where they may not get this kind of celebration or appreciation. So this can be challenging. Also, when you think about military people, like enlisted people have what they call AOC, and that's area concentration. Let me make the correction, officers do. And then enlisted people have MOS, and that's military occupation specialty. So this can be challenging too. Say I am a mechanic and I worked on airplane. How does that translate, or how am I able to get a job in the civilian world when I may not be working on planes, but I want to work on automotives? So having a career counselor help you to be able to take the skill sets you have as far as the military and transition those into the civilian world can be very helpful. Oftentimes, military people feel like they're underemployed versus overemployed, and there can be employee bias. And what I mean by that is oftentimes when people say that they are veterans, immediately different things come to people's mind. You're rigid, you're stern, you're all of these different things. And oftentimes people will make statements. And these statements are not necessarily to be offensive, but they can be. I use an example like during COVID, I still came into the office, and I did that because I was the program coordinator and we were not an online program. So I wanted to be readily accessible to students so they themselves can reduce that level of anxiety. But oftentimes people will say, oh, you are that way because you have been in the military. You're just still boots on ground. Now they said it maybe not to be offensive, but I found it, I don't necessarily want them to say that to me. But I feel like a lot of who I am, I often tell people, it's because I grew up on the farm and because of my parents. It had nothing to do with my military background, but they just taught me really good work ethics to get up, to go to work, and to do the things that you have been called to do. So it had nothing to do in reference to the military. So these particular stereotypes sometimes can often keep people from getting a job, or when they aren't in a job, make them feel like dim their light because they don't want people to feel a certain kind of way. I retired as a colonel. And so oftentimes people will say, oh, you act that way because you're a colonel. You expect certain things. And I'm like, no, that has nothing to do with it. I expect excellence because just as I operate, it has nothing to do with it. So I'm not transferring those things. So all of those things can be very challenging when you think about it. That's what I wanted to say about some of the mental health challenges that people can have. So just think about depression, anxiety, transition from moving from one place to another, family support, a lack of family support, or moving into an environment that is not necessarily military friendly.
Thank you, Dr. Holloway, for those great facts and your personal experience with this. As we have heard, there are many issues, mental health issues that impact the career issues that we see with veterans. And from the research that we've done, we have found statistics that support the fact that veterans want and need support when they're transitioning to their civilian life and into that career perspective of their life. When we talk about supporting their translation of military skills to civilian equivalents, 79% of veterans that were surveyed said, we want that. We need help with that. When it comes to one-on-one career counseling, 70% of veterans say, yes, we need that support. It's important to us. And when it comes to veteran coaching and mentorship programs, 69% of veterans are saying that this support is important to them. In viewing these statistics, hearing about these issues, Dr. Holloway and I pulled together to say, what can we do to better equip career practitioners with some just starting points for this population? So it's not going to be all inclusive, but it definitely gives a guide to where to start when working with this population. So we're going to move into just talking about some of the career theories, just some basics about the career theories that we can use when we're working with this population. And the first one we're going to talk about is John Holland's theory of types. So if we've heard of the strong interest inventory, that is one of the inventories that's used with this theory. And it's basically a theory that taps into people's interests. So there are several different areas that people can have interest in. And when we use this type of theory with our veterans, we're able to see where their interests lie as it relates to careers outside of the military. And when we talk about those transferable skills, this is a theory that we can use to help them see how those skills transfer. So one of the categories is realistic. So when we talk about a realistic type, this is the type of person that likes to work with their hands. They're not necessarily people, but they love to work with their hands. They love to work with machines. They love to be practical and natural. They're thrifty type people. So this might be a mechanic in the military. How do we transfer that into work skills outside of the military? We've got investigative. So this personality, they love to solve things. They love to look at things and put pieces together. They're very intellectual in nature. They're thinkers. So how do we take that type of skill set where they may have been the combat people that had to think about different strategies and ways of handling things as it related to combat? How do we take those same skills and help those individuals get into positions that fits outside of the military? An investigator when it comes to law enforcement, there's investigation over there. How do we help them see that connection? We've got artistic and that type. They love to be artsy. They like to be independent. They love to be creative and original. How do we help them find that space outside of the military? They may have been the ones in the military that were responsible for keeping people motivated and engaged and finding different ways to deliver information to people that was creative and that helped them to remember it and stay encouraged and have fun. Because while we understand that is a very serious occupation, I'm quite sure at some point there was some fun that took place. So how do we help them take that creativity and transfer it into the civilian workforce? Social, those people are very helpful. They're understanding. They're responsible. These are our teachers. These are our trainers. These are the people that are interested in helping people learn and grow. So they may have been a sergeant in the military and responsible for helping the new employee, the new people coming in, understand the ropes. How do we help them transfer that into teaching and training and helping people outside of the military? Enterprising, these are our business people. These are our people that are persuasive. They're energetic, they're optimistic, and they're able to get people to follow them. They're able to get people to join in for the cause and be on board. That could be your colonel. That could be your major in the military because they are responsible for getting the troops together and rallying them together to achieve the mission, which is of the most importance to them. So how do we help them transfer that into the civilian world? And then we've got our conventional type. And with this type, we're looking at people that like to work with numbers. We're looking at people that are practical, they're careful, but they're also very orderly, they're very structured. So how do we help these individuals take that structure, that order, and place it in a position in the career force that fits them, but it may not be the military? So Holland, again, helps us to delve into those areas of their personality, also their interests, to help them transfer those skills into the workforce outside of the military. And one thing and a great thing about this theory is they don't have to just fit into one category. Usually this theory, after you do the assessments that come with this theory, there's a 3-letter code. Sometimes people have 2 letters, sometimes they may have 1 letter, but the majority of people will end up with a 3-letter code. So that gives them even more options as to where they can go. It doesn't pigeonhole them. It gives them a lot of different spaces that they can go into that will fit their interest. And so it gives them and you as the career practitioner a starting point to work with to start researching career paths that may be beneficial to them. The next theory that we have is Schlossberg's transition theory. And as Dr. Holloway mentioned, we know that there's a transition that takes place with individuals in the military. Sometimes that transition may be while they're in the military, moving from place to place, moving from rank to rank, moving from state to state, job to job. Other times the transition looks like moving out of the military. And so when there's that transition that happens where they're moving from the military into the civilian workforce, Schlossberg says we look at 4 different areas. What is the situation? What is happening with themselves personally? What supports do they have? And then what strategies do they have in place? So when we talk about the situation, we're talking about what triggered their transition. Were they discharged from the military medically? Were they discharged from the military because it was dishonorable? Or did they have an honorable discharge? Did they retire from the military? There's so many different things that factor into that situation that impacts their mental health. It could impact their physical health, but it also impacts these other 3 areas as well. So now we're looking at their self. We're looking at how old are they when they're leaving the military? What gender are they when they're leaving the military? What are the health concerns that they may have coming out of the military? And then understanding that military culture, whether they're leaving it or what, it's still a part of who they are. Looking at their psychological perspective around the situation. Are they excited about being able to move out of the military into a different aspect of life? Or are they, depressed or anxious or nervous regarding this change that's been placed on them because maybe it wasn't a decision of their own? So we have to take a look at that when we're trying to figure out career options for them. Then we have to look at the supports that are there for them. What support system is in place? Do they have family and friends that they can lean on? Obviously, we know that the military provides a certain structure and support system. It's embedded in being a part of the military. So once you leave that, if your social network is not as strong, obviously you can still communicate with the people in the military, but they probably are dealing with some of the same stuff. So how do you make connections with people that can support you? Do you have people in place now? And if not, how do we get that in place for you? And then strategies to cope. Do they have appropriate strategies to cope with these mental health and physical health conditions that we talked about that may be hindering them from their job search or being an issue for them as they're trying to move forward into another aspect of employment? So what coping strategies do they have in place? What does their flexibility look like? Are they able to be flexible in this process? Because in the military, they may have been in the same position for years. Coming out into the civilian world, it may look like it may take a while for you to get one position or another. Or if you came out as a colonel, you may not start at a colonel position in the sense of a high position. You may have to start low and work your way up. So how flexible are they when it comes to being able to cope with the situation as it relates to their transition? All of these are important for us to understand as career practitioners, because as we are working with this population and they're transitioning from one position to another, we have to make sure that we understand their thought process around it so that we can help them and meet them where they are. And then one of the last theories, or the last theory, I should say, that we're going to cover in this podcast is Larry Cochran's narrative theory. And this theory just basically says we're giving these veterans an opportunity to tell their story and to use the composition of their story to really identify where they are, where they would like to be, and to draw those connections. So we let them talk about the career problem that they have. We let them compose their life history story. So tell us about how you got from where you started, where you got to, and then where you're trying to go. So then that's eliciting that future narrative. Where would you like to see yourself? What would be your dream position outside of the military? And then we help them to construct that reality. You tell me where you're trying to get to. Now let's talk about how you can get there. Is it realistic? And if it is, let's talk about the steps that need to happen. Sometimes there may need to be a change in their life structure. And so we talk with them about that, so that they understand those changes that may have to take place for their reality to happen. We allow them to enact that role and do those pros and cons and help them to process through what they look like in those positions or in that position that they may want in their career. And then lastly, with this approach, we help them to make a decision. After you've outlined what it's going to take for you to get there, are you willing to put forth the energy to do? If so, then let's work toward that. If not, then what are you willing to do and what are you willing to work towards? Larry Cochran just says we allow them to tell us their story and then we just help them to fill in those missing pieces. So those are 3 theories that we can definitely start with when we're thinking about working with the veteran population, just to get some idea of where they are and to give them some ideas of where they could possibly go. So now we're going to tap into just some ethics. And one of the reasons we wanted to tap into ethics is because as we're working with this population, we have to understand that this is a vulnerable population. It is a population where we need to know what we're doing when we're working with them. We need to be familiar with the culture, the diversity considerations. We need to have a respect for confidentiality because, as we know, this population comes from a world where they are very tight-knit and they are trained to keep things under wraps. And so if we want them to trust us as career practitioners, we have to make sure that we're maintaining their confidentiality as well. On the other side of that, when there may be danger or legal requirements for us to share, we have to make sure that we've also shared that with them because we talked about the mental health concerns that may come from it. So with depression, we know that sometimes suicidality may come with it. So we have to have those conversations to ensure that they're clear on the fact that we will keep their information private and confidential, but these are the grounds on which we may have to share it. Getting whatever professional development we need is so important because, again, this is a population that comes with a different set of needs. They come with a different thought process, and we want to make sure that we're equipped with what we need to work with them best. Understanding how to create effective service plans with them. And we don't want to create them for them. We want to make sure that we're involving them every step of the way. In any thought processes that we have, Dr. Holloway talked about how people may perceive veterans based on their experience in the military. And I always like to tell my students, when you think about whoever you're working with, you put your stuff in your pocket. However you may perceive people, that does not matter and should not impact the work that you do with them and the fact that you must do your best at any given time that you're working with any clients. And then lastly, we're just going to talk about the appropriate use as it relates to assessments. Many of the career theories that we discuss come with their own assessments to give to the veterans. And so we want to make sure that we're clear on how to use them and that we're using the assessments that are appropriate for the population. The last thing we have is just a discussion of a few resources for those that may be working with this population and just need a starting place as to where to find additional information.
These career resources for veterans has been set up for veterans working with veterans. So they have Hire a Hero. You're going to find in these various resources companies that are user-friendly, that understand veterans. We have the resume engine, help them to develop their resume. One that is very popular is the Career One Stop. And there has a lot of different elements to help veterans, GI Jobs. You can use ONET Interest Profiler, which she's already talked about, the strong interest inventory, Veterans Employment Training Service, a VA for vets. The Veterans Affairs Office is a really good place to start. You may say, I don't have one in my area. There will be one that geographically that you can get in touch with. And you can also will have a veteran affairs, a person that will be appointed to them. So if you're working with students that are on campus, make sure that you get in touch with the Veteran Affairs Office, and they will be very helpful in terms of working with it. Oftentimes veterans, you'll hear veterans say that I don't get the support I need. I go to the VA and I don't. So just make sure that when you are connecting them, that the individual on the other end, it's a good connect. It's no different than when you are looking for a therapist. You may give a list of therapists, but it may not be a good connection. Doesn't mean that person is not an excellent person at their job. It's just maybe personality wise, or maybe that person doesn't feel comfortable with that person. So make sure that when you make the connection, you do a follow up and you actually check in with the individuals to make sure that they're getting what they need. Thank you. So this kind of concludes our presentation at this time. And we've had the opportunity to talk about issues as it relates, theories, and then ethical issues, and then some resources that you can have that are available. Dr. Barnes, do you have any last comments?
Thankful for the opportunity. And hopefully we've shared some things that can just give a jump start. Obviously, this is not all inclusive, but for people that are working with veterans, we really wanted to shine some light on some of those issues, but not just what the issues are. How can we start to work through those issues so that we can help this population?